Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our 9th webinar at the University of Buffalo Center for Entrepreneurial Leadership. Today, I'm lucky to have with me Erin McGee, the director of the UB Center for Entrepreneurial Leadership. And
good morning, everyone. I'm glad to be here.
And of course, many of you already know me out there, but I'm Tom Albert, Assistant Dean at the for Entrepreneurship and Social Innovation Initiatives for the university. So welcome today, and one of the best things that we do at CEL is we have a set of ongoing forums that we offer to business owners, and we meet monthly with them. There's just shy of 100 people involved right now in it, and they navigate through ongoing challenges of running their business every month as they get together. From these forums over the last year and a half or so, we've had a lot of challenges come up that repeat themselves over and over again, and we've created a bit of a toolbox that we have of best practices that we're going to share with you today. So we've got 10 items for you today, 10 different areas that we're going to talk a little bit about that will help you run your business more efficiently. And I just want to start by saying we are going to skim over these very, very quickly, but we will be able to provide these resources to you via email and some attachments after the presentation if you are interested in getting them as we dive deeper into some of the topics. So first, I want to be sure to thank the Diamandis Group, who is a sponsor for the Center for Entrepreneurial Leadership. Thank you for your support, their support, and they make this webinar possible along with many other things that we're able to do at the center with their help. So thank you, Diamandis Group. So let's start today by unlocking some tools that can make your business run smoother. First, we're going to talk about some big picture topics, and then we'll dive into a little bit more detail in specific areas. Now, I want to say too that we've covered some of these in a little bit more depth probably here and there in past webinars, but if they're in here, I think it's really, real important because often we expose people to these topics, but it takes a long time before people really start to engage and use some of the tools that will really help their business. So I think the first thing we have to think about as business owners is where are you going? And that comes down to strategic planning and letting your strategic plan be your guide for the future and where you're going. And one of the challenges that we talked about in an earlier webinar about strategic planning is the fact that often people have a bad relationship with strategic planning. And that's because we often make it overcomplicated, lots and lots of meetings, lots and lots of paperwork, and a binder or a manual that goes up on a shelf, maybe never to be seen again. And I think one of the important things about strategic planning is it's best when it's simple and it's clear, and you have a clear direction. And really what we're trying to do is understand where we're headed, where we're going. And I always like to tell people when we're doing strategic planning, the most important thing you can do is not figure out what you're going to say yes to, but understand what you're going to have to say no to in order to say yes to a few things. And I think the other thing to remember about strategic planning is it needs to be in some format that is flexible, simple, can be engaged frequently, can be updated easily. And the reason for this is we live in a very dynamic world today. Things change quickly. And because of that, your strategy may not change where you're headed, but how you're getting there or what road you're going to take certainly can change along the way. So when we talk about strategic planning, we've got some great resources for you, but I think one of the best out there is if you wanted to visit scalingup.com and just search for growth tools, and all this information is free for you. It's a tool that we use here at the center. Will help you create the Gazelle's one-page strategic plan or the Scaling Up strategic plan. I do want to mention there's certainly other options out there. There's EOS or Traction. There's other operating systems that are out there that are certainly useful and good to use. I'm super familiar with Gazelle's and highly recommend that, but know there are other options. So as you go through the process, just to remind you, those of you that maybe have been through it, and if you've not been through it, really what, excuse me, really what we're looking for is to understand what your core beliefs, your values are that influence everything about your organization. When your core beliefs, your purpose are clear, it helps your employees make the right decisions. It's the do's and don'ts of the business. Then we look at directionally where we're going and actions we have to take to live out our core values. Then we'll simply set 3 to 5 year goals, 1 year goals, and quarterly rocks. And probably shouldn't have said simply, because the end result is a relatively simple form, but with that, there's a lot of work and thought that has to go into it, because again, we're looking for the 1, 2, 3 clear objectives of where we're headed and into the future, and we really want to focus on that to have a great strategic plan. As I leave this section, let me remind you one more time, think about what are we going to say no to in order to say yes to a few things. So Erin, do you want to talk a little bit about the daily routine?
Yes, absolutely, Tom. Thank you. So the number 2 tool we want to share with you is about the daily routine. So we went pretty large picture talking about a strategic plan. Now we're going to scale down a bit and talk about your everyday routine. And the trick with this is that we all have the same 24 hours in a day. So time management is an art form. So one of the best tools that we share with people about in terms of managing your time is a story that took place about 100 years ago with Charles Schwab, who was one of the richest men in the world at the time. Schwab was president of Bethlehem Steel Corporation, the largest shipbuilder and second largest steel producer in America at the time. So he was well respected, really smart with what he did. And one of the things that he wanted to achieve was continually find ways to motivate his team and get people to focus on making the most use of their time. So in his quest to find the most efficient use of his team's time, he brought in a well-respected consultant named Ivy Lee. And according to the story, Schwab brought in Lee into his office and said, "Show me a way to get more things done." The same question we still ask ourselves 100 years later. So Lee asked for 5 minutes with each of the executives and told Schwab that it won't cost anything, but to instead send Lee a check in the coming months for whatever Schwab felt the value was. Simple enough. After 3 months, Schwab called Lee back into his office and wrote him a check for $25,000, which is today's equivalent for about $400,000. So what is this secret? What did Lee tell Schwab's team that made such a huge difference? Because I'm sure we all want to be able to write a check for $400,000 for somebody who can help us improve our time. So looking at the Ivy Lee methodology, it's relatively simple, and that's why it works. It's simple, it's basic, it forces you to focus, you know where to start each day, and it forces you to single task versus many of us pride ourselves on multitasking. So the methodology goes like this. There's 5 steps. At the first one is at the end of each workday, you write down the 6 most important things you need to accomplish tomorrow. No more than 6. Number 2, prioritize those 6 items in order of their true importance. The third step is when you arrive to the office tomorrow, concentrate only on the first task. Work until it's finished before you move on to the second task. Fourth step is approach the rest of your list in the same fashion. At the end of the day, move any unfinished items to the new list of 6 tasks for the following day. And the final step is repeat this process every single working day. So that's the simple magic between the Ivy Lee methodology, and hopefully it will help you to achieve more productivity in your day by picking the critical things and helping you to get them done.
I think in following up on that, one of the interesting things is I know a lot of our entrepreneurs are out there thinking to themselves, I can't possibly do this. My day is filled with firefighting and things that are just flying past me. And I would say if you just try to do this at some level, figure out what those few strategic things are that will move the ball for you down the road and use this method on those. And one of the things, Erin, that I really like is that it's only 6 items. So, and the reality is if you can get 6 strategic items done in a day, that's pretty impressive. So if you keep it to 6, it really forces you to get rid of the to-do list, which some people might call, that do time management would call it the not to-do list that has 300 items on it that you're never going to get to, and really thinking about prioritizing what are those few items that are really important. And related to that, Erin, there's this other area that we often, actually, I think this started because you threw this on my desk. I'm not quite sure why, if there's a hidden there, possibly, but who's got the monkey? So you want to talk a little bit about that HBR article, and we can give people this after the presentation, but really impressive article about managing people and managing our time, related to managing our time.
Yes, absolutely, Tom. So great point about the distractions. I know that it's really simple to try to be strategic and pick certain items, but the challenge is if you have a million distractions, how do you navigate those? So this is another great tool that we want to share with you about. It's made famous by Williams Onken and Donald Wass, and then it's been summarized in the Harvard Business Review over the years. So why is it that you as an owner, as a leader, as a manager are so often running out of time when it seems like there's maybe opportunities for members of your team to take on some of these other challenges or tasks that are taking up your time? So let me explain about this methodology. So imagine you're walking down the hall and you run into a member of your team. It's an employee that mentions that he or she has a problem. They start to go into detail. You know you need to get involved, but you're in a rush. You have to be somewhere else. You can't make an on-the-spot decision. So you simply say, let me think about this and get back to you. You continue down the hallway. It's a simple concept. I know we've all done it in the past. In the framework of this concept, what actually happened was that your employee had a monkey on his or her back. When you took on the next step of the problem, the monkey jumped quickly onto your back, and you are now in charge of feeding the monkey and caring for the monkey until it's resolved. So I sure hope you brought a banana in your lunch today, because I'm sure that that hasn't happened to you just once. So think about the number of times that happens to you in a day, in a week. In your effort to fix problems and be a great leader, you inadvertently take on one, two, and many of these monkeys. Suddenly you have a full office, a full to-do list with these monkeys. So the million-dollar question, how do you get rid of these monkeys? How do you transfer the initiative back to employees that you have? You have a great team. They're willing to jump in. So how do you transfer these initiatives back to them? So let's talk about clearing these monkeys out of your office. So according to this article, there's a couple steps that you can take to take these monkeys off your back and put them onto the very capable backs of your team. There's 5 rules to this methodology. Number 1 is that monkeys should be fed or shot. If it's a legitimate challenge, feed it, find someone to feed it. If not, time to get rid of that monkey. Number 2, monkey population has to be kept to below the maximum number the manager has time to feed. The same goes for your employees. Don't take on too many monkeys. Don't let your employees take on too many monkeys. Number 3, monkeys have to be fed by appointment only. You as a leader shouldn't have to hunt down these monkeys or chase down people to address the monkeys. Make sure there's an appointment and a next step. And make sure those next steps are face-to-face or by phone. This goes to number 4. Don't let your employees email you about monkeys, or don't let these monkeys come to you in an inbox, because then they become your monkeys. And the final piece of this is make sure that there's an assigned next feeding time and a degree of importance for all these monkeys. When you become vague about next steps, that's when these monkeys start to multiply a little bit further.
Thanks, Erin, and bear with us. We've got a little bit of technical difficulties here, but I think we got it solved, and we'll just share our headset. We got a few notes that I was not able to be heard, so sorry about that. So let us jump into the concept of checklists, and we've talked about this a little bit, I think, in the past. But once you've got a roadmap and you've got a clear list for the day and you know where you're going, you want to make sure that your business continues to have consistent, high-quality products and services. So one of the ways to do this is through checklists or standard operating procedures, where repetitive tasks can be put in the form of a checklist that everyone should be able to learn quickly. You should be able to train your people faster, and a lot of things should be able to operate well without you being there making every decision. So there's been a lot of research done on checklists, and I think one of the great places to start is with a book called Checklist Manifesto, which is a really, really good book for all business owners to read. But it really was written by a surgeon. And if you think about surgery, it's certainly not an uncommon activity to take place in the world. Yet, according to data from the National Center for Health Statistics, there are about 50 million surgical procedures that take place each and every year in the US. But of those patients, about 150,000, yes, that's a pretty big number, of them die during the surgery, and over half of those deaths are caused by avoidable human error, like simple things like cleanliness or failing to confirm that there's enough reserve blood on hand before surgery.
But I understand, we understand that you are not, we're not surgeons and we're not getting in surgery in the next few weeks, but I certainly want to reference the brilliance of the surgeon that came up with this. And I want you to think about it. You may not be performing surgeries, but if it's important enough for surgeons to have a checklist, it's certainly important enough for you to have a checklist. And if it can be successful in surgery, can be successful on aircrafts, it certainly can be successful in your businesses. Many, many industries like the airlines, construction require these stringent processes. But again, does your small business really require this, I guess, is the ultimate question. And for all the reasons that I said earlier, I think it's important that you do think about this for the efficiency standpoint, but also the fact that we're human and therefore flawed decision makers, have unreliable memories. So despite experience, we often make mistakes. And unfortunately, it's in those tasks that you would think are the most simple or the things that we do all the time that we get sloppy in and that we forget about. So there's really 4 components to a useful checklist. Of course, there's information on it. All the best checklists that I've seen with really issues that have serious consequences typically have a pause point in them where everybody has a stop and they can really double check to make sure everything's the way it's supposed to be. They should be speedy. For a lot of the work that we do, usually less than a minute. They should supplement existing knowledge, and overall, they should certainly be practical. And one thing that I would recommend is that we really think about if you're just starting to develop SOPs or checklists, think about letting your team or your employees that are on the front lines doing the work really build those checklists for you. At least take the first shot at it because they're out there doing it. Let them do that piece, and then you can review them, make them better, collect them, publish them, and you'll have a great standard operating procedures and a set of checklists to use. I'll also say the greatest help that I think they will bring you, one of the greatest tools, is as you onboard new people, it can become part of the training program, and it makes onboarding much, much faster, easier to do, and simple, and a lot more consistent over time. So let me give you back to Erin for the next area we're going to chat about.
Great, thank you. So we're gonna shift gears a bit and go into the people side of things. And again, I know we're giving you a lot of content for early in the morning, but if there's questions or anyone wants to dive deeper into this afterwards, we can certainly send out a toolbox of a lot of this content. So we're gonna shift to the people side of things. We know that the people side of things is a challenge, an ongoing challenge for many small business owners and leaders. So number 5 tool that we want to talk about is, we call it hire like it's your job, because it is. But hiring is difficult. We know that it's one of the biggest challenges. We see people hiring for the wrong fit, or people that just don't connect right in the organization. So think about an interview process. They're quick. You have maybe about an hour to try to figure out if the person in front of you has not only the skills, but the personality, the ability to fit in with your team. It's really a difficult task. So what should you be asking? What should you be looking for? And how do you determine all of this in such a short period of time? So I'm going to give you a little bit of background into what a lot of hiring managers have shared as some of the most important skills to look for. And then I'm going to go ahead and give you some tools that you can use to help uncover those skills in a person sitting in front of you in a stressful interview situation. So over 60% of hiring managers said that screening for soft skills is difficult, but it's necessary. So how do you find those, and what are those soft skills you should be trying to uncover in a potential employee in your business? So in order of importance, what they ranked as the most important soft skills are adaptability, culture fit, collaboration, leadership abilities, growth potential, and prioritization. And these skills are great when you can find the person who has them, but how in the world do you find out these people sitting in front of you if they have them or not? So the good news is that the trick to uncovering a lot of this is through behavioral interviewing questions. So behavioral interview questions are a proven way to reveal a person's ability to collaborate, adapt, and more. And these are going to be questions that can help you look through past behavior, because past behavior often determines what someone will be like to work with. So behavioral interviewing questions focus on a candidate's past experiences by asking questions that provide specific examples of how they've demonstrated certain behaviors, knowledge, skills, and abilities. Answers to these often provide concrete evidence as to how a candidate's dealt with issues, and this actually gives us a good level of experience of how this person can handle similar situations that might come up in your organization. These questions are often pointed and specific. Some of these examples are, tell me about a time when you were asked to do something you've never done before. How did you react? What did you learn? These are open-ended questions where you're asking the candidates about having them describe a situation they might have been in, what was the result when, and you can present them with issues that are happening in your business and see if they can relate past experiences to those. What's the last thing you've learned on the job? What are 3 things that are most important to you in a job? So questions that we often don't think of asking in interviews are sometimes the key to unlocking whether or not somebody's a great fit on your team. So now we're going to move on to now that we've searched for the right people, we've gone through the interview process. Number 6 is the tool we talk about. We call it right people, right seats. So now that you have a way to find those people, how do we get them doing the right things? And a lot of this comes from us as leaders. If we're not being clear in what we expect from somebody, how do they know that that's what they're supposed to do? So oftentimes, small business owners have shared with us that they feel like their business is a game of who's on first, what's on second. If that's the case, you're not alone. In many small businesses, it becomes really unclear of who's responsible for what. Sometimes multiple people are covering the same responsibilities. In other cases, nobody's responsible for things. This makes it really easy for balls to be dropped and challenges to come up where the right things aren't getting done. So the tool that we love to address this is called the functional org chart. And a functional org chart is really an image that you can create. There's website tools that we'll talk about in a minute, or you can do it on paper, you can do it on a whiteboard, but it uses boxes or shapes to clarify what roles you need to run your business. By having one of these, it creates a lot of clarity around who reports to who, the relationships between the departments, and who's responsible for different tasks. So in order to create these, the first piece that you need to do is forget about everybody on your team and just get a pencil, paper, go to the website we'll tell you about in a minute, go to a whiteboard, and start to create boxes for each of the functions that need to be done in your organization. You leave out people's names, you really just focus on functions, and you start to create responsibility boxes for each item that needs to get done in your business. After it's clear what items need to be getting done, then from there you can start to plug people back in. And oftentimes you'll find that maybe the marketing responsibility, maybe there's 3 people that are covering that, but nobody is actually responsible for onboarding or for recruiting, or oftentimes you can identify gaps then when you start to put names to these tasks and seeing what's getting done and who's doing it. So as I mentioned, you can use a pen and paper, you can use a whiteboard. One of the great tools that we use, one of the great sites we use is called lucidchart.com. It's LUCID chart, CHART.com. It's a really simple free tool, and it helps you clarify who should be doing what, and it gives you some good visuals that you can then print and save for your team and change on an ongoing basis as your business changes and grows. All right, I'm going to turn it back over to Tom to talk more about the people side of things.
So we are definitely passing back and forth the mic, so hopefully you can hear us okay. So let's jump into the culture of coaching. So staying on people. There's a lot of research, and we talk about this a lot at the center, that perhaps the only competitive advantage that you have left in a company are your people and building a great team. Today, it's more difficult than ever to find great people, to keep great people, to figure out how to incent people. And I think one of the things we like to talk a lot about is this culture of coaching. So the 7th tool we want to talk about is the actual culture of coaching, and not just coaching as in an annual review, but consistently coaching your team and your employees, having conversations all the time about what's good, what's difficult, what can be improved, debriefing, how did we do? And one of the great books in this area around coaching that we like to recommend is Fierce Conversations by Susan Scott. So why Fierce Conversations? Because I think most of us as business owners have difficulty having these fierce conversations. And we've talked before in earlier interviews about many of us will think that everybody thinks like we do. And somebody used this example the other day that was in here that said, I don't understand why when I'm walking across the shop floor, I have to pick down and pick up a piece a paper off the floor when everybody else has walked over that? Why can't people see that? Well, people just don't see that. And if everybody was an owner, everybody would be an owner and we wouldn't have any employees. So it's really important for us to recognize that we have to be very, very clear with people. And we've given you some of that information around organizational charts and job descriptions. We have to be really clear, first of all, what is the job? What are the expectations? Many of us aren't even clear about that, and we just think that people should know what they're supposed to do in their job. But once we've been clear and have written job descriptions, the second piece of it is we have to disseminate that information. And the third and most important piece that many, many small business owners don't do is, if you've done the first two steps, is to really hold people accountable. And you can do that through, again, Susan Scott has some great information in her book, Fierce Conversations. So Fierce Conversations doesn't have to be about yelling and screaming, but it's really about naming the issue. What's the most important thing we need to be talking about today? Making sure we clarify it, what's going on, how long has it been going on, how bad are things, determine what the current impact is. So how is this issue currently impacting you, our team member? How is it impacting the company? What results in the situation currently are they producing for you? How is the issue currently impacting other people around you? Then we have to start to determine future implications. So if nothing changes, what is likely to happen? So what's at stake for the person that we're coaching or working with to lose or gain relative to this issue? And then we would examine the personal contribution to the issue. How have I, as the leader, contributed to the problem? How have you, as the team member, contributed to the problem? Talk about ideal income or outcomes, I'm sorry. When the issue is resolved, what difference will it make? What outcomes will there be? What results will you enjoy? What will others around you enjoy? And more importantly, a commitment to action. So what are the most important steps that we're going to take to move things forward? And then finally is, of course, some type of follow-up. So let me leave this area by saying, don't be afraid to have fierce conversations. And again, if you embrace this culture of constant coaching, you eliminate lots and lots of problems that tend to build up and fester inside of an organization. So the next area that I'm going to talk really briefly about is your financial know-how as a business owner. We have not talked a lot about this on past webinars, but we certainly will do probably a webinar just on financial know-how sometime in the future. But if you don't know your financials, how are you possibly going to make good business decisions? And many, many small business owners do not have a good grasp of their financials. And I want to start by saying you really need to know your numbers. We've got some handouts that we can send to you with some critical numbers around it. But I would start with saying that many, many small business owners don't utilize their accountants in the right way. So many of us go to our accountants once a year to do our taxes, but we don't use our accountants as managerial accountants to help us make decisions, to meet with them quarterly. So that's a first place to start, is ask to meet with your accountant, ask to sit down, work with them to develop these ratios and important benchmarks that you need to pay attention with your company. Let them teach you how to analyze your financial statements. And I'm not going to go into great detail here, but I will give you some really high-level stuff. The first is, most business owners are familiar with their income statement or their profit and loss, and that's all they look at. You don't understand your financials till you understand the three pieces of your financials, which include not only income statement, but your balance sheet, your cash flow statement, and how the three of those pieces interact with each other and work together. So that's the first step, is make sure you're looking at more than your income statement. And again, if it's difficult for you to do, make sure you get some help from your accounting firm, and they will certainly tell you what's important for you to learn and know and understand. The second area is benchmarking. Many of your accountants, or most, will be able to give you benchmark reports. We can do so here at the center too. And benchmark reports look at industries, your industry, and related to your company, and will let you know kind of what are other people doing, what are other companies' benchmarks that you can benchmark against with your company. There's one challenge here, and I want to make sure that when you're getting a benchmarking report, you ask your accounting firm or wherever you're going to get it from that, are you benchmarking against the top 20% of companies in your industry? One of the challenges I see of benchmarking, especially free benchmarking reports you get, they're average. They're the average of all the data in there. I never want your company to benchmark to average, because average is just that, it's average. We want to be looking at those companies that are the top 20% or so of our industry. There's also many different ratios that are important to your business that we will send out a handout that will give you some of those that you can discuss with your accounting firm. And the most important part, I think, for most small businesses is I really want you to be thinking about cash flow. For most of us, cash flow is really critical. And we always say cash is king or queen, or cash is the oxygen of your business. When you have good cash flow, you can take a little bit longer to make decisions. You can perhaps buy better. You're not constantly under pressure. But when you think about cash flow, you want to be thinking about the cash conversion cycle. And there's really only a few things that you control. You can control the sales cycle, you can control the delivery cycle, the billing cycle, or the make, production, or inventory cycle. So again, we have some, not for this webinar, but we'll go into some more detail in the future, but pay attention to cash and cash flow as you look at your business. And as I'm sitting here talking, we definitely need to do a webinar, and perhaps we'll bring in an accounting firm like Bonadeo Group to help us do that, to give you some best practices for your small business. So let me turn it back to Erin, and we'll talk about some of our favorite apps and tools.
Hello again. So we're going to switch gears completely, and we're going to talk about technology, some of the best apps that we have. So we all know that the rate of change in this world is astronomical. This is a whole nother topic we could spend hours talking about. But to really hone in on how important it is to be aware of technology, I wanted to share with you a couple slides from Dr. Peter Diamandis, who recently spoke at the UB's Distinguished Speaker Series. He's known as one of the world's 50 greatest leaders, as named by Fortune magazine. And his entire topic was about technology, the speed of change. So in his presentation, he shared about Blockbuster, who went from a $6 billion business in 2004 to bankrupt in 2010. The point he was trying to make is that the CEO of the company was not paying attention to the rapid speed of change. And in 2008, in a board meeting, said neither Redbox nor Netflix are even on the radar screen in terms of competition. 2 years later, Blockbuster was bankrupt. A few years after that, not even 2 years after that, Netflix went on to be a $2 billion business and have soared way beyond that. So we certainly don't want to scare you, but we want to remind you of the power of technology. There's also a lot of ways to use it to your advantage. So in today's talk, we're going to give you some of the best tools, some of the greatest apps that we love, that a lot of our customers love, to make their lives easier. So there's a ton of apps I'm going to go through right now. I'll quickly hit on a lot of them. Feel free to do some research on your own and keep sending them to us. We love to hear about technology that makes your life easier. So for communication, some of the greatest apps that we found are Yammer. It's a free social networking service. You can use it for private conversations between groups or within teams. Slack is similar. It's instant messaging. When it comes to project management, Trello is a great app. Basecamp is another great project management tool. It really forces you to track your project towards a goal so you can have a lot of accountability as you move towards those strategic goals within your business. Wunderlist is a cool app. It focuses on sharing lists. So it's everything that your team can share, checklists before an event or before manufacturing a product. You can also share grocery lists with your spouse. When it comes to another app to track time, Rescue Time is cool. So it shows how long you're spending on apps and websites. So you can either set timers and focus back on important items, or it can give you a snapshot of how you're spending your day. Dropbox is really popular on how to store and share files. It's great if you have remote teams. When it comes to other apps, we talked about a little bit before about Lucidchart. That helps you create flowcharts, process maps, anything like that. Asana is a cool app. It helps you view tasks and projects. That is a great app because it even integrates with Dropbox to share files and Slack for communications. If you need to create a nice looking flyer, invite, or brochure, but maybe you're not able to design it on your own, or that's not one of your skill sets, we use Canva. They give you a good amount of templates that you can plug text into. And then also, I'm sure many of us use Square, but it's a great payment app for small businesses, food trucks, beauty salons, retail shops use it. You just get a reader, put it on your phone or device, and you can take fast and convenient payments. So for the final item, I'm going to pass it over to Tom.
Okay, the last area I want to talk about with you today and share a little bit on is, what do the great entrepreneurs or the most successful business people in the world do? And I think one of the things that we often forget, we get caught up in our day-to-day activities, but is the concept of continuous learning or inspiration, being inspired, taking care of ourselves. All those are really critical. And for those of you that are CEL, you know that I love, or in CEL, I'm sorry, you know that I love Richard Branson, and I often talk about, just when you talk about taking care of yourself, he has been quoted multiple times in articles. The busier he gets, the more time he spends in the gym, et cetera, to take care of himself. But what do people use, and some tools that we like out there, just to share with you really, really quickly, is what is out there that you can use. And many of these you may have found, but I love podcasts. Things like How I Built This, the Tim Ferriss Show, Tony Robbins. I can go on and on and on and on about podcasts. I only really discovered, well, I obviously knew they were out there, but really got into listening to podcasts probably about 4 years ago. And it's a great way to learn. It's a great tool to do some learning while you're driving, while you're exercising, while you're working out. Another thing that I think many of you do know about, there's some unbelievably great TED Talks. The challenge is there's so many of them, is how do you find the best one? TED has a really good search function, and they also have, a lot of people don't know, but TED has other stuff broken into categories too that you can find that will help you. And often TED Talks are great for team building and learning also. Another area that I think a lot of entrepreneurs fail to pay attention to is self-care in the areas of, taking care of yourself emotionally, mentally, spiritually. And there's a lot of great tools out there that you can use. Things like Headspace, Calm, Happify, forums, accountability groups, all those types of things are very, very helpful for entrepreneurs. So I want to wrap up. We went a little bit longer than we normally did. So we hope that you find the tools helpful on your journey and your climb with your business. Thank you for joining us. We will definitely review the podcast. And I got, again, some notes about not being able to hear in the beginning. If there's a bad challenge with that, we will re-record it for you before we put it up online, where you can refer to it and use it. If you'd like any of our resources, just send us a quick email. You can send an email to me if you like, talbrick@buffalo.edu. You can send it to the center. Whatever you'd like to do, just send us a quick email and we'll get you those resources and tools out there. So we will see you again with our 10th podcast coming up. In another little bit, we'll send out a note on that and let you know when it's going to take place and what the topic will be when we share this link with you. So sorry for we're a little bit over our typical half hour, but thank you for joining us. Hopefully you had some good takeaways today, and we look forward to seeing you next month. Thanks again.